Hi and welcome to part 2 of this hard surface modeling exercise. Today we're going to continue modeling our detailed Sci-Fi floor panel. I've had a look at the objects and I would like to change a couple of things before we continue. One thing I told you in the previous video was actually not quite true, and what I told you was that we will get problems when we try and use a bevel deformer on poles, but we can actually do that, and I don't know why I didn't think of that in the previous video, but we can use some settings in the bevel deformer to make those bevels work on poles as well. And one example would be the corner of this panel base. If I weld these points here and these ones, and then add a bevel deformer, it's not going to look very pretty. But one thing we can do is use the angle, and we still have an issue on the corner here, but what we can do to fix that is switch the mitering to uniform. And now we're getting a clean bevel despite the fact that we have a pole with multiple edges here. So what that means is that we can optimize the geometry a little bit. And in order to keep quads here, I'm going to dissolve these edges. I'm not going to do this for the center part, we're going to do later, because having triangles on corners like this on a hard surface model is perfectly fine. And you already saw in the previous video that sometimes we get problems when we dissolve edges and turn these polygons that are folding in on themselves into quads. And up here I think we could actually weld these points here and then dissolve these edges and these ones. So we're still keeping quads here, but I've just reduced the polygon count a little bit. And I think that's it for the panel base. Let's have a look at the lid. And on the lid we can weld these points here and these ones over here, and then we can dissolve these edges and I'm going to select all of these ones and then use the even distribution script to even out the geometry. And we still have quads everywhere here, so that's fine, and we've reduced the polygon count a little bit, which is good. Let's take a look at detail number 1. Same procedure as before. I'm just going to weld these points here and then dissolve these edges and even out the geometry. And if you ever want to spend some money on a plugin and you do a lot of modeling, get the HB modeling bundle. It's really priceless. It has changed the way I model things, because I can make changes like this and even out the geometry and get something that is perfectly nice. And that would be so much harder to do without that script. Okay, so let's have a look at this detail over here. And I've already checked it, it's basically fine. We can, however, reduce the polygon count a little bit. We could weld these points here and over here on the other side. And then we can select these edges and dissolve them. And over here, same thing. Let's weld these points. and these ones. Select these edges. Just make sure to deselect these ones again. And dissolve these edges. And up here, we could break the font shading on these. And same here, you can see the shading is a little bit off. So let's break the font shading to fix that. So let's continue and take care of this area at the center here. And Vitaly Bulgarov did the Scifi panel not as a single object. He split this up into a couple of parts. And we're going to do the same thing because it makes sense. This area here is part of the panel base. And then we have a second part, which is this one that goes around here. And the centerpiece will again be a separate piece of geometry. I'll just remove the children from the panel base for now, drag this out, and I'm going to hide everything except for the panel base. And what we're going to do first is create an outline around this shape here. And I'll do this by moving this edge over, and I'll move this edge over to about here. And then I'll use the line cut tool, switch off single line and visible only, and I'll make a cut here. And I'll make another one here. And then we can select these polygons, and I'm going to melt them into an n-gon. And I'll just adjust the position a little bit. Let's move these ones over. So something like this should be fine. And over here, let's get rid of these edges by dissolving them. And I'm going to use extrude inner on this n-gon. And I'll just turn these into n-gons. And we need to adjust the position of some of these points here. We can also get rid of this one. And I'll just move this one over a little bit. Maybe let's just scale these down. We don't need to be super accurate, to be honest. And over here, I'll move these points over like so. Something like this, and I'll make a cut here, and I'm going to connect the geometry here. And I'm going to weld these points to this one, and then just copy the position on the x-axis and paste it to this point here. And we can delete this edge and select this one and move it over to 0 on the z-axis. Next I'm going to bevel this point here. And let's see, that doesn't actually look too bad. Maybe I'll bring this up to 85 and give it 11 subdivisions because it's a fairly big detail on this object. And let's remember this offset, we're going to need it later. And then I'll just start removing this n-gon here by connecting every other point. And we can dissolve this edge here. And I'm going to select these polygons and split them off. And we can use that for the other details. And for now, I'm going to rename this to detail 3. Switch it off. And on our panel base, we need to make one more cut from this point all the way across. And now we can delete these polygons and these ones, optimize and extrude this one down, and you can see this polygon has a height of 15 centimeters, so we need to extrude this one down -15. Delete these polygons, and with a polygon pen I'm going to close the geometry here. And for now I'm going to get rid of these edges here and turn everything here into n-gons as well. And over here we need to extrude these edges down. Again, -15. And we need to use an angle of 90 degrees here. Deselect everything and optimize the object. And then I'm just going to select all of these edges. And let's have a look at this one. This is 70 centimeters on the y-axis. And I'm going to quick extrude this down a bit, then hold down Shift and extrude it 70 centimeters. Deselect everything and optimize. Oh, and I think that didn't work so well. Let's try that again. And that is looking better. And before I do anything else, I think I'm going to add bevels to these corners. And I'll start with this one. So let's go ahead and bevel this. Maybe I'll do this in a perspective view. Like this, and for this one I'm only going to use 5 subdivisions. And again, I'm optimizing the object, and I'll also clean this area up right away. And I'll make a cut from this point. And again, remove this n-gon by connecting these points. Next, I'm going to bevel this edge here. And I'll stick with 5 subdivisions. Optimize the object well at this point. and just remove the n-gon up here. And then what I'll do is I'll make a cut maybe about here. And I'll clean this area up. And then I'm going to bevel this edge here. And I think 5 subdivisions is fine, but because this is a slightly bigger curve, let's do 7. And I think that looks fine. Optimize again. And let's clean up the mesh by connecting these points. And over here, I'm going to connect these 2 points, then use connect points edges on this edge to create a point at the center. And again, I'll remove the n-gons here. I want to keep the geometry as close to the corner as I can, because we also need to add these details here. And these ones are going to be a little bit messy, but I will try and prepare everything, so hopefully it's going to be a little bit easier to add all that stuff over here. And I'll just make another cut here. Let's have a look at the top view. I'll move this away from the area where this hole will be just a little bit. So next I'm going to do something that you can't see. Let's have a look at the original panel by Vitaly Bulgarov. We have this cutout here, and I want to add this before I put those holes in there, because I think it's just going to be easier to deal with this area first. So let's go ahead and do that. So what I'll do to create that cutout is, let's just have another look at the top view. I think I'll just continue this edge here. And then I'm going to ring select these edges and connect them. And I'll select these edges and any one of the edges here on this level. And I'm going to scale these. And I'll do maybe 30 centimeters. And then in this area we will have the cutout, and we need another area down here. And again, I'll make this 30 centimeters. And we need to extrude these edges down a little bit more. It doesn't matter how far you extrude them down. We're going to delete that part again in a second. And over here, we will have this cutout here, and I want it to continue a little bit into this straight area here. And what I'll do to make that happen is I'm going to select these edges and I'm going to clone these in. And I'll just move this edge over a little bit. And we can weld the points here. And down here. And dissolve these two edges. And over here I want to continue that cutout a little bit over to here. So I'm going to select these edges here and move them over a bit to maybe here. Let's select this edge. I'm going to copy the size. And next we need to remove this polygon and this polygon. And then I'm going to select these ones and the ones here at the bottom, but not these ones. And I'm going to extrude these back by the amount I just copied. So I'm just going to paste that in there. And let's delete these polygons here. And that's looking good. And now we can ring select these polygons, get rid of them, delete these ones and these ones, and optimize the object. And we also have a roundness on these corners here, and I think it might be a good idea to add that before we cut in the other details. So I'm just going to select the edges on the inside here, and we also need these ones over here. And I'm going to bevel these. Let's do maybe 11, see how that looks. Could be a bit more. Let's do 12 or 13. And I'll just use 5 subdivisions for these. Deselect everything and optimize. And let's clean up the geometry a little bit. I'm going to weld these points here and here, and I'll remove these n-gons. And this time I'm not going to bother turning these into quads. We're bound to get problems like this one. There we go, we already have that. I don't want to waste your time sitting there watching me trying this again and again until I get something that doesn't turn into a black polygon when I remove the edge. It's perfectly fine to keep these triangles. Now over here I'm going to weld this point and this point down to here. We could also connect these two, and let's go ahead and remove these n-gons. And I think what I'll do here is let's just select these points and move them back a bit. I think we might as well weld these, and what that means is we can get rid of all of the edges here and here. And I'll just save this out as a new file, just in case I need to redo this section. This is a bit tricky, and also it's kind of important in which order you do things, because certain things will be more difficult if you don't do them in the right order. For example, putting in those square holes is more work if you don't have the edges down here beveled when you put those holes in there. So let's see what we can do here. So next we're going to add these square holes here, and I'm going to add some geometry before I use some cubes and a bool object to get those holes in there. And I'm using the plane cut tool, I'll switch that to world and to YZ, and we're going to create an outline around these details here. Now we have another one here, and we have another one over here. And let's add a cube. I'll move this over to this hole here, and I'm going to scale it down. To about this size, doesn't have to be super accurate. And I'll also make it editable, because it's just a little bit easier to work with the geometry when it has been made editable, instead of using or trying to manipulate a parametric cube. Let's make sure to select all of these points. I'll just undo that. So these ones need to go up a little bit, and these ones need to go down through the object like this. And I'll make a copy of this and move that over to here. And let's make another copy, and this is going to be this hole here. I'll just select all of the points and scale them down, and move these ones back a bit, and move these ones forward. And I'll make a copy of this one and move that over to here. Let's have a look at the perspective view. I just want to make sure that everything's okay. And one thing we need to change is we need to add a little bit of geometry here at the bottom. Otherwise, that bool object is going to be a little bit of a problem. So let's grab our panel base and go to edge mode, and I'm going to select these edges. Let's see, maybe we don't need all of these. Oh, we need all of these here. And I'll just extrude them over so they go beyond those cubes a little bit. Okay, something like this, and I'll make 3 of these children of the 4th one. Let's go ahead and add a bool object, drag that in there, and we'll get something like this. Let's have a look. And that looks good, I think. And we don't even need to hide the new edges. All I will do here is switch on create single object. And I'll make a backup copy just in case. And I'm going to make this one editable. Okay, so that's not looking too bad. Now I do want to get rid of some of the triangles here, I think. And what we could do is weld these points here. And if you wanted to, you could also move these points back a little bit and do something like this. And over here, same thing. I'll move these points back a little bit. And over here we'll keep this as it is for now. I may want to change this later. One thing we could do is, see, we could weld some of these points. We don't need all of these edges. Let's weld this one over, and that means we can dissolve these edges here. I think that's all looking good. Now back here, I'm also going to weld this point and dissolve these edges here to clean up that area. And I will move these points over. To about here maybe. That's just so we get less stretching. Some areas we can't prevent it, but in some areas we can make this look a little bit nicer. And I think we could also select these points here. And I'm going to move these over a little bit. Maybe let's move them to about here, and then deselect these ones and move these ones forward a little bit further. Oh, bad idea. I'll keep it like that for now. If we want to change that, we would have to change the topology a little bit, add more edges over here and bring edges over to here. I might want to do that later, but for now I'll just leave it as it is. Let's switch to polygon mode. And we don't have any n-gons. Let's go and see where the triangles are. Okay, there's definitely some weirdness here. We seem to have polygons on the inside here. Let's go ahead and try and see if we can select this and remove it without causing any issues. Just going to reselect the triangles. Let's try and select this one, and I'll switch on tolerance selection and just deselect this and delete this triangle here. Let's also optimize the object. Select all triangles again. And these ones are easy to get rid of. We could just add an edge here and scale this down. Same here. Now, like I said before, I'm not going to worry about these ones and these ones. And down here, we can change that. And what I'll do here is I'll select these 2 points and connect them. Get rid of this edge, get rid of this edge. And we actually have quads. Over here, I'll just dissolve this edge. And we're getting these edges because we did get these edges because I didn't hide the new edges on the bool object when I made it editable. So basically we have some triangles in this elongated hole here and over here, and I'm not sure if I want to change these, but what we can do is select these polygons here. Let me switch off tolerance selection again. So select these ones and these ones, and then I'll just hide the unselected polygons. And let's have a look at what's going on here. And I think we could simply dissolve this edge here and this edge over here and just connect these points. And let's just weld these ones to the back. Although I'm not sure if I can do that because this point down here might be connected to the geometry that we currently can't see. Okay. You know, I'll just try and weld these points. And maybe we could do this the same way it is on the other side. And just make a cut to here. Get rid of these edges just to make it consistent. So let's go back to polygon mode, and I'm going to unhide everything. Select all the triangles again. Okay. Now over here we could just weld these points. Which will give us a triangle here. But we could weld all of these and get rid of that. And if you want to get rid of this one here, let's see, what can we do? We could just weld this point, which is not really an improvement because we're getting a triangle here. Let's have a look. We can't really remove these edges here, can we? But we could probably connect this edge here, weld these 2 points, and then connect all of these edges. Did I get them all? Actually, we don't need these ones because there's that hole at the bottom. And then we can connect these 2 points. So that's turning this into quads here. Maybe move these over again a little bit, but not that much. Line these up. And there we go. So now we only have the triangles on the inside here, and in these areas here, and on this curve over here. And I think that's fine. Before I cut these holes into the panel, I'm going to add this rectangular detail, and we also need to change the areas here. You can see we have 2 slanted surfaces here. So let's go ahead and add those. And the way I'm going to do that is I'll select these edges and I'm going to bevel them. And I don't want to use any subdivisions here. Let's jump to the top view. I'm just going to increase that bevel a little bit to about here maybe. And you can see that creates a total mess over here. But we can easily fix that by welding these points here. I'm also going to optimize. And now we have an n-gon inside there. And I'm going to remove that by connecting these points here. And that gives us two triangles. And I'm going to get rid of those by selecting these edges here and connecting them. And then we can move these points forward, but first of all I'm going to do the same thing over here. Actually, it looks like we don't need to. We have quads here. Now we do have an n-gon here. So let's go ahead and remove that. Over here it's different because we have different topology. So let's see, what I'll do instead is I'll just connect these points, which gives us a triangle here. And let's connect these points, and then we basically can do the same thing we just did on the other hole, which is select these edges and connect them. And then let's select these points. And these ones, and I'll just move them over on the z-axis a little bit. I think I did something wrong here. Maybe I connected the wrong points. I'll just dissolve these edges again. And I'll try and do that again. We should be able to connect these points. Oh, let's get rid of this one. And I'm going to connect these two. And then I'll just connect these two edges. Connect these two edges. And just weld these points. So that does give us quads down here, doesn't it? And I did screw up something here. I'll just go back a few steps. Sorry about that. I am improvising this a little bit. And this is live modeling. And sometimes things are a bit tricky. So I'm going to connect these edges again like before. Really. And I'll just select these points. Make sure that I only have 2 points selected, and I'm going to weld them up to this point. And then we should hopefully be able to weld these. Okay, and this time I didn't screw up this area here. So we've got quads here. Let's just check that by selecting all triangles. Okay, and this time I did everything right. So now let's continue with this cutout here. And for this I'm going to use a cube, and I'm going to move it over to here. Oh, and by the way, here's a little trick that you might find useful. You can see that I'm zoomed in on this area, and I just get rid of this cube again and create it again. And whenever you add an object, it will be created at the Cinema 4D center of the world. You can see this blue little arrow over here, it points to where the object is. Now if I go to my move tool and I try to move it, I can't really get it over here, so I would have to zoom out and then drag it over. But I don't want to do that. And what I can do in order to get that cube over here without having to zoom out is I have my move tool selected and I switch on snapping. And now wherever I click in the viewport and drag my mouse, that object will jump to my cursor. And I'm going to put this cube here and scale it down like this. And I'll make it editable. And I'll select this polygon and move it down. And I'll select this polygon and move it back a bit to about here. And I'll select this polygon and move it up a bit. And you can make that as deep as you want. I'm going to do something like this. So I think that will look fine. And now let's just add a bool object and add that cube in there. And I'm going to create a single object, but I'm going to hide the new edges this time, because if I don't, I get all these edges here. I don't want these because they're just going to make things more complicated when we add those holes in there. So in this case, I'm going to hide the new edges, and we can still adjust the depth of this cutout if we want to. I'm going to make this a little bit deeper by moving this polygon down, something like this maybe, and I'll make this editable. And we can still modify that. I'm going to bring this polygon at the back forward a little bit, and I'll connect these points here to get rid of the n-gon. I'm also going to connect these points. Oh look, I've created a bit of a mess over here. I'll just select these points and simply weld them to this point. Over here, I'll connect these 2 points. And I'll select these 2 edges here and add a chamfer to them, something like this. So now we can start cutting those holes in there. And there's a couple more things I want to do before I do that. One of them is I'll make another cut from this point here all the way through the object, and maybe I'll cut from this point here to make sure we get the cut throughout the object. So I'll make a cut like this, and then I'll grab my rectangle selection tool, switch on tolerance selection, and I'll select these edges here and dissolve them. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to minimize the mess that's going to be created when we add these holes as much as possible. And there's only so much we can do, but at least we can try. Next, I'm going to grab my plane cut tool. I have the plane switched to YZ here, and I'm going to make a cut in between these holes, something like this. And what that means is that the mess that will be generated by each of these holes will be contained within each hole's area. I'm going to dissolve these edges here. And now let's add a cylinder. And again, switching to my move tool, switching on snapping, and then I left click and drag in the viewport and the cylinder will jump to my cursor. And now I can move it into position and scale it down a bit. And for these holes, I'm going to keep the default rotation segments, which is 36. I'll make a copy of this and move it over to here. And we need to scale this one back up a little bit. And maybe I'll select both of these and I'll just move these over a little bit. We need to add this chamfer here, so we need a little bit of room, and I also want enough room to be able to add bevels without creating a total mess. So I'll move these over a little bit, something like this maybe. And we also need to change the height of both of these cylinders so they penetrate all the levels here. And let's make this one a child of the other one, and I'll create another bool object and put those cylinders in there. And for this one I also want to create a single object, and I'm not going to hide the new edges this time. So let's see what we get. It's not too bad actually. And I'll make a backup copy just in case. Let's switch that off, and I'll make this one editable. And I'll just change the geometry a little bit. Now let's see over here. We need to get rid of one of the edges, and I think it's this one. Now, whatever you do will probably look a little bit differently, so you'll have to find out which edges you need to remove and which ones you can keep. And now I'm going to loop select the edges of the holes, and I'll try to use stitch and sew to create geometry in between them. And let's see if this works or if we have to fix things. Now you can see we're getting these zigzag lines, and that means we still have additional edges that we should get rid of. I'll just undo that and go to point mode, and I'll try to find in the top view where we need to remove edges. So we definitely need to remove this one, and it looks like it's difficult to see. We'll probably just have to try a few times and see if things work. So let's try and loop select these again and use stitch and sew and see what we get. And we're still getting those zigzag lines. Let's see. And that is of course why people hate the bool object, because this is what happens all the time. But in this case it's really just going to be easier to use the bool object anyway. Not sure where the problem might be here. Because everything seems to be fine down here. So maybe we have another issue somewhere up here, and it's this edge here. I'll just remove that. So let's just try again. And this time it's working. You see, we're getting proper geometry here. So that's good. Now let's try the same thing with the hole at the bottom. And this one is working fine. So let's try these ones over here. Select this edge loop and this one, and then stitch and sew these together. And here we have to fix a few things. Let's go to point mode. Apparently we need to get rid of this edge. Everything else seems to look fine, so let's just try again and hope we get lucky. And of course we don't, so there's another one over here we can get rid of. And let's check the bottom as well. Everything seems fine down here, but of course it's a bit confusing and it's difficult to tell. And this time it's working fine. So let's try the bottom hole. And this one's working fine as well. So that's good. Now we have that hole in there, or all of these holes rather. Now we need to add a chamfer to that top hole, and in order to be able to do that we need to create an n-gon again. And I'll just select all of these polygons here and melt them back into an n-gon. And if you want to add that chamfer down here as well, you'll need to do it down here as well. It's not in the original model, and arguably there's no point in doing this down here because nobody will ever really take a look down here. So I'll just remove the polygons here and create an n-gon, and then I'm going to select the edges and bevel them, and let's do an offset of maybe 5 should be fine. So let's see how that looks. It's looking good. We still have a bit of distance to the corners here and here. So unless we make our bevels too big, that should still work fine. And now I'm just going to select the two n-gons and remove them. Now there's one more thing, and that's these small holes here. And of course I also want to add those. I'll just have a look down here. Oh, everything seems fine. It just looks a bit confusing because we have different geometry on this top surface here than we do on the levels below. In order to create those small holes, we're going to use another cylinder. Again, move tool and snapping, left click and drag your mouse, and I'll move it to here. Switch off snapping and scale it down a bit. and I'll move it around. Actually, we do need snapping because I want to snap it to the center edge here. And we need to scale this down a little bit further. Well, actually, we don't. Let's make it about as big as it is in the reference image. And I'll reduce the rotation segments for this one to 12. That should be more than enough. And then I'll just move it over to about halfway of this chamfered polygon here. Something like this. And let's go ahead and create a copy and move that over. And I'll move this to about here. Should be fine. I'm just eyeballing this. Maybe I need to move this back a little bit further. Select both of them and change the height, because again we need to make sure they go all the way through the object. And I'll make this one a child of the first one. Add a bool object. I want to create a single object, but I'm not going to hide the edges. And we're getting something like this, and that's not looking too bad. And I'll just make another backup copy. And let's make this one editable. And I'll remove the tags from this one, except the font tag. And let's see what we can do to fix that up. We don't want this edge here. And I think I'm also going to weld this one and this one. It's going to change the shape a little bit, but it's more important to reduce the mess that we're bound to get if we don't try and fix a few things. We can get rid of this edge here, and over here everything actually looks fine. I'll just optimize the object, which didn't do anything. And down here at the bottom, it looks like everything's okay. Yeah, and we probably have to make similar changes over here. In fact, we need to make exactly the same changes. So I'm going to remove this edge here, weld these points, and weld these points. Over here, I'll get rid of this edge. And we should be fine. Let's get rid of this edge. And these two, and of these two. And over here we don't have any geometry between those holes. So we're going to play the same game that we played before, which means I'm going to loop select both of these edge loops here, and then use stitch and sew. And you can see we still have an issue here. So I'm going to undo, switch to point mode, and see what I can do. And it looks like we have 2 points very close together here. I'm going to weld these, and hopefully that's all the changes that we need to make. Nope, it isn't. So let's just go back a step, switch to point mode again, and weld these 2 points, back to edge mode. And now this is working fine. So let's move down to this one. Just checking if we have the same issue down here, and we do. So I'm going to weld these 2 and these 2. Select the edge loops and use stitch and sew. And this is looking pretty good. And I think I'm going to add a cut here through the entire object. It's something like this. And what that means is that we can get rid of these edges here, which will hopefully help to get a cleaner bevel. Also remove these edges. So this basically turns this into one quad, and we're getting another quad on this side, and we don't have geometry or edges that are as close together as they were before. And theoretically, well, not just theoretically, we could actually do this down here as well. I'll just switch off visible only and make a cut like this, and then just dissolve these 2 edges. And I'll do the same thing down here. And let's see if we need to make any changes. We could do the same thing with these holes at the bottom as well. And let's weld these points to get rid of that triangle. I'm going to select all of the n-gons, and we only have one here. I just deselect everything and optimize, and that leaves 8 n-gons. So let's go ahead and select those. And let's see how we can fix those. I guess over here we could just make another cut that will create more geometry, but I don't really mind. Let's weld these points. Now we have an n-gon here. The reason being, I forgot to switch off visible only. So I'll just go back a step and try that again. I'm going to cut from this point here. And I'll just weld these points. And I've just optimized the object again. And all the n-gons we have left are in here. Let's switch to point mode and see what's going on here. I'll just select these points because most likely, there we go. Here we have a couple of points, and I'll just weld these to here. Let's go back to polygon mode. We still have two n-gons. And that's because we have the same issue on this other hole here. So just select these points and let's weld them to the corner, and we should be fine. So it's all quads and triangles now. Let's select all the triangles, and you can see they're only in this area here, and that's good. Let's have a look at the rest of the mesh because I spotted something earlier and I think we can change that. Let's see, I'll try and weld these points, which means I can get rid of these edges. And let's see if we can get rid of these ones. No, we can't, because we need these down here. And I'll just add another polygon here. Actually, we don't need these edges, so why don't we just select them and dissolve them. Okay, so that's looking fine. I'll just straighten out this line here. And before I continue with the next detail, I'll just test a bevel deformer on this. And you can see we do get a couple of issues. Some polygons are exploded out here. So I'm going to switch on angle, and that gets rid of some of the issues. We could also try and change the mitering to uniform, and that didn't do anything. And one other thing we could do is try and bring the angle down, not the angle, the offset. And I mean, that is one of the issues that you are likely to run into with objects like these where you have small details as well as big ones. I am wondering though why we're only getting this issue in this area. So let's have a look at what's going on here. And you can see we do seem to have a problem here. Let's see if we can fix that by welding some points. I'll just remove these polygons and close that polygon hole. And I'll remove the n-gons on this one. And let's switch on the bevel deformer again. And this is looking good. And of course we can't bring the offset up too much. We have these small holes over here. And on these ones the bevels are not looking too good. Let's switch that back to default. That's making things worse. Switch that back to uniform. If I bring that down, it's going to look a little bit nicer. But considering that the size of the details is so different, the bevels are actually not looking too bad. So we're still getting those highlights. And over here some of the edges do not get beveled. And that's because of the angle threshold. If I bring that down a little bit, we get a bevel in these areas here as well. We should make this a little bit bigger. Well, maybe it's just the lighting. I'll bring this down. Do I have ambient occlusion switched on? I think so. Yes, I do. Let's just put this in a symmetry object. The bevels on these ones could definitely be bigger, so that you can actually see that the edges are beveled. And we'll still probably have to use selections because we can't use just one bevel deformer to bevel all of the edges. But considering the different sizes of the details, it's actually not looking too bad for most of these. I'll just delete this again. And of course we could also try and change the topology. Let me just go back and switch off that bevel deformer. So just for the sake of trying this out on one of these holes, I'm going to melt these polygons here, and I'll just connect these points, and I'll make a cut from here over to this one, and another cut here. And if I weld these points and switch the bevel deformer back on, you can see we're getting a much cleaner bevel now. So part of it is certainly the topology. Let's just try and remove the n-gons here and see what happens if we switch the bevel deformer back on. And it's still working, and it's working a lot better than before. And you can see that on this hole down here. So let's make the same changes over here. So how did I do this? Okay. So I'll melt these ones down and I'll melt these ones down. Let's not forget this one. And I'll just make a cut and another cut. Remove the n-gons here. Switch on the bevel deformer, and we're getting nice and clean bevels over here too. And let me just check those bottom holes. And of course we get a similar issue here. So let's try and fix that too. And let's see over here. I'll select these ones, not this one, and turn these into an n-gon, and I'll turn these ones into an n-gon. And then I'm going to make a cut here, which I can't do. Can I cut from this one to this point? Yeah, but the edge is very close to the edge of this hole. So the question is if that will really work. But what we could do is, if we switch our single line, we could make a cut like this. And then we could just connect these two and these 2 points and remove the n-gons here. It's a little bit better. So it does work a lot better if we keep these as n-gons, but I don't want to do that. So what I'll do instead here is I'll just use extrude inner like so, and I'll just remove these edges here again by dissolving them. And then we can select this polygon, turn it back into an n-gon, and now if I use the bevel deformer, it should work fine on this hole. I wonder where this edge is going. Going up here. I don't think there's a point in having this, is there? Well, yes, there kind of is, because we have this connection back here, or this edge back here that we do need. But what we could do is just weld these ones, or these points, and then just dissolve this edge here. switch on the bevel deformer, and we are getting a clean bevel here. So how's that bevel looking on these other holes? Well, we do get similar issues here, so we'll have to fix that as well. So let's switch off the bevel deformer, select our object again, and over here I'll just turn these polygons into n-gons and these ones over here, not these ones. And using the knife tool, I'm going to make a cut around the object like before. And I'll just connect these points again. And that should fix that problem over here. We also need to connect these points. Let's go ahead and remove the n-gons, switch on the bevel deformer. And of course, we should also do an extrude inner on this one. Dissolve these edges. Remove these n-gons. And we have a nice and clean bevel on this hole as well. And of course we need to make the same changes up here. But I really don't want to have to do this all over again. So what we'll do is we'll just select these polygons here. And delete them and optimize the object. And then I'm going to select all the polygons here. And before I do, I'm also going to make the same change I did at the bottom. Just weld these edges. Can we do that here? And actually this is part of the curve. I'm just going to weld these points and then get rid of these edges here. Which leaves an n-gon here. We'll take care of that in a minute. So let's just select these polygons. And these ones. I'll just ring select these ones. And I'm going to split these off. Center the axis on them. And I'm going to snap them to the top level. Which should be this edge here, hopefully. Yeah, not quite. It's this edge here. I just remove that bevel deformer and select both of these objects and use connect objects and delete. Let's go to point mode. Deselect everything and optimize. And then I'll make a cut over like this. Get rid of this edge. And where is this one going? It's going over to here. I'll just weld these 2 points. Switch that off. We still have an issue here. The issue is we have a polygon missing. I'm just going to add that. And we're not getting very nice bevels over here either. So I'll make another cut, switch off visible only, and I'm going to make 2 cuts actually. Like so. Let's remove these edges. And let's see how that bevel looks now. You can see that's looking a lot cleaner. Now we do get a similar issue back here as well, but it's not that bad, so I'm not going to change anything over here. We have 4 n-gons, and optimizing doesn't do anything. I'll just select them. Oh, right. Let's just connect the points down here, like so. So we're back to triangles, but that's fine. And where was the other one? They're both inside here. I'll grow the selection a couple of times and then just hide the unselected polygons. Select the n-gons again. Okay, I'll connect these points here and down here. Let's just hide or unhide everything again. And I'll grow the selection a couple of times more. And then hide the unselected again. Deselect everything. And let's select the n-gon. And it's down here. And the reason I selected more polygons is I want to see where the geometry is continued. So I think in this case I'll just connect these 2 points, go back to polygon mode, let's unhide everything. Let's add another symmetry object and change the mirror plane to XY. And there we go. I think that this is looking pretty nice. And the topology is looking pretty good as well. Let's do a quick cell render because I want to see that rendered. Switch on color edges and let's change that to a lighter color. And I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. So this has taken quite a bit of time to complete, and I think I'll just record a third part where we're going to finish the panel by creating the other 2 pieces here at the center. I hope you've enjoyed this second part and you've learned a few things, and I hope to see you again in part number 3.